Sold for nothing, the alien girl was deemed worthless. Until a human changed her life, the station called Karis Gate never slept. It circled a blue dwarf star and glowed with layers of light, metal, and moving screens. Ships came and went every minute. Voices from 100 species mixed together into a constant low sound, like wind passing through a forest of steel. To most of the galaxy, Karis Gate was a place of opportunity. To others, it was a place of endings. Along the inner ring of the station was a market that did not appear on tourist maps. It was clean, well-lit, and legal under galactic trade law. No chains were used. No shouting was allowed. Everything followed rules. That made it easier for many to ignore what was being sold. Sentient labor. Rows of platforms lined the hall. On each one stood a being, calm and silent, with a data panel floating beside them. The panels listed species, biological traits, skills, projected lifespan, and economic value. Buyers walked past slowly, reading numbers and probabilities, speaking in quiet, careful tones. Near the far end of the hall, on the smallest platform, stood a young alien girl. She was thin, with pale skin that reflected the station lights in a dull way. Her eyes were large and dark, and her limbs were slightly uneven, a flaw by galactic standards. Her species name appeared on the panel, followed by a long list of notes. Low strength, low endurance, limited industrial use, no combat value. Minimal learning speed, according to tests designed by other species. At the bottom of the panel was a single number. Value, 0. No one stood in front of her platform. Buyers passed her without slowing. Some did not even glance at the panel. The traders overseeing the hall barely looked her way. She was not a problem. She was already solved. The girl kept her hands folded the way she had been taught. She did not move unless instructed. She did not make eye contact. She breathed slowly and tried to take up as little space as possible. This was not her first market. She had learned that attention was dangerous. If someone noticed her, it was usually to confirm what they already believed, that she was weak, that she was a burden, that she was not worth resources. So she waited. Across the hall, a human stood very still. Elias Mercer had arrived at Karis Gate only 3 days earlier. He was an official observer, sent by a small human coalition that had only recently been accepted into wider galactic trade. His job was simple on paper: watch, listen, learn, and report. Humans were still considered new, emotional, and unpredictable. Observers were meant to prove they could follow rules. Elias had seen many strange things since leaving Earth. Alien architecture that bent light, species that spoke through color or vibration, trade systems that ran on logic humans found cold but efficient. Still, nothing had unsettled him quite like this hall. At first, he did not understand what he was seeing. The lack of noise confused him. On Earth, markets were loud. Even auctions had energy, movement, emotion. Here, everything was quiet and measured. Buyers scanned data. Traders nodded. Transactions happened with a soft chime. Then Elias read the panels. He moved slowly down the line, his expression tightening as he understood. These were not animals, they were people. Different shapes, different minds, but clearly aware, clearly alive. And clearly priced. He stopped at several platforms, asking neutral questions to the traders. They answered politely, explaining supply and demand, biological efficiency, and social compatibility. It was all legal. It was all regulated. It was all considered ethical by galactic law. When Elias reached the far end, he almost missed her. The platform was small, the panel dim. No buyers stood nearby. He read the data once, then again. Value 0. Elias frowned. He checked the species notes, scanning the list of limitations. Even by the hall's logic, 0 seemed strange. Others with poor ratings still had some number, even symbolic value. He looked up. The girl did not look back. Her gaze was fixed on the floor. Her posture was careful, like someone trying not to be seen. Elias felt a slow, unfamiliar pressure in his chest. He turned to the nearest trader, a tall being with smooth silver skin and calm eyes. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Why is her value listed as 0? The trader glanced at the panel, then at Elias. "She has no market viability." "No one wants her?" Elias asked. "She cannot perform meaningful labor," the trader replied. "Her species has limited compatibility, and she lacks even the minor traits that sometimes increase interest." Elias hesitated. "Then why is she here?" The trader tilted its head slightly. "Inventory clearance. She occupies space and consumes resources." Her previous holder released ownership. Elias looked back at the girl. So what happens if no one buys her? The trader paused, as if considering how much explanation was necessary. She will be transferred to a processing authority, likely reassigned, possibly relocated. The outcome is not our concern. Elias did not like how easily that was said. He stood there longer than was polite. Other buyers noticed him and gave him curious looks. Humans were still rare here. A human stopping at a zero-value platform was stranger still. The girl sensed the attention and shifted slightly, her fingers tightening together. She did not raise her head. Elias activated his translator softly. "Do you understand me?" he asked, speaking gently. Her eyes flicked up for half a second, then down again. "Yes," she said quietly. Her voice was thin but clear. Elias swallowed. "What is your name?" The question was not standard procedure. Names were not required in this hall. She hesitated. "I have one, but it is not useful." "I'd still like to know," Elias said. Another pause. "My name is Eri." Elias nodded, as if that settled something important. He turned back to the trader. "What is the minimum price to finalize transfer?" The trader looked confused. "There is no minimum. Her value is 0. So I can acquire her?" Elias asked. "Yes," the trader said, "if you wish." Around them, quiet attention began to gather. Buyers slowed, traders glanced over. This was unusual. Elias took a breath. "Then I will." The trader blinked. "You wish to acquire a zero-value asset?" Elias did not like the word asset. "Yes." "For no return?" Elias met the trader's gaze. "For responsibility." The trader processed this, then nodded. "Very well, authorization accepted." A soft chime sounded. The panel beside Eri flickered. Ownership status changed. Eri felt it immediately. The subtle shift in her implant, the signal that told her she now belonged to someone else. She closed her eyes, waiting for instructions. Orders usually followed quickly. None came. Elias stepped closer to the platform. "Eri," he said, keeping his tone calm. "You don't have to stand there anymore." She opened her eyes slowly. "What should I do?" Elias considered the question. It was simple, but also not. He chose his words carefully. "For now, just come with me." She looked uncertain, then stepped down from the platform. Her legs shook slightly, unused to movement without command. She stopped a short distance from him, unsure how close was allowed. The hall returned to its quiet rhythm, but something had changed. Whispers moved through the traders. A human had taken a zero-value being. For nothing, as Elias led Eri toward the exit, she glanced back once at the empty platform. It had been her whole world for a long time. She did not know what came next. She only knew that, for the first time, someone had looked at her and asked a question that was not about use or cost. The corridor leading away from the market was quieter than the trade hall, but Eri could still feel the station around her. The floor vibrated softly with distant engines. Lights shifted color to guide traffic. Every sound made her tense, waiting for a command that did not come. Elias walked a few steps ahead, careful not to move too fast. He had noticed how stiff she was, how her steps were small and controlled. He slowed without saying anything. They reached a transit lift. The doors opened with a soft sound, revealing an empty space inside. Elias stepped in and turned slightly, leaving room. Eri hesitated. Lifts had rules, positions, expectations. "It's okay," Elias said gently. "You can stand anywhere." She entered and stood near the wall, hands folded again. The doors closed and the lift began to move. Neither spoke. Elias watched the numbers change above the door. He was aware of how strange this must feel for her. He had read reports about sentient labor systems, but reading and seeing were not the same. He wondered how many questions he could ask without causing fear. Eri watched his reflection in the metal wall. Humans were different from most species she had seen. Softer faces, no visible dominance markings, no clear rank symbols. That made them hard to understand. When the lift stopped, Elias led her into a quieter section of the station. This area held temporary docking bays and small living modules rented by travelers. The air smelled cleaner here, filtered differently. They reached a modest door marked with human symbols. Elias pressed his hand to the panel. The door slid open. Inside was a small living space. 2 chairs, a narrow table, a sleeping area separated by a divider. It was not impressive, but it was warm. Eri stood frozen just inside the doorway. "This is where I'm staying," Elias said. "You're safe here." Safe was a word she had heard before. It usually meant until further notice. He gestured toward a chair. "You can sit if you want." She sat carefully, perching on the edge, ready to stand again. Elias moved to the table and activated a dispenser. I'm going to get some food. If there's anything you can't eat, tell me. She stared at him. You are asking me? Yes, he said, slightly puzzled. You know your body better than I do. No one had ever said that to her. I do not know what is allowed, she said slowly. Elias frowned, then softened his expression. Here, nothing is forced. If something makes you uncomfortable, you can say no. The dispenser hummed and produced simple nutrient packs. Elias placed one in front of her and sat across from her, keeping distance. Eri examined the pack. It was labeled for human consumption, but she could process most organic matter. She took a small bite, testing. It was bland but warm. Elias watched without staring. He was trying not to overwhelm her with attention. After a moment, he spoke. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to, but I'd like to understand what happened to you. Eri swallowed. I was assessed. I failed. Failed what? Elias asked. Utility, she said. My species is often used for fine manipulation or low-risk environments. I lacked precision. My neural responses were slower than average. My health projections were inefficient. Elias felt his jaw tight. So they decided you were worthless, she nodded once. That is the word they used. And you believed them? She looked down at her hands. It was supported by data. Elias leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Data can be wrong. She did not respond. That idea did not fit easily into her understanding. There was a pause, not an empty one, but a quiet one. Eri realized something strange. She was not being monitored. No one was timing her responses. What will you do with me? She asked suddenly. Elias met her eyes. I don't see you as something to do something with. That is not an answer, she said, but there was no challenge in her voice, only confusion. He nodded. Fair. For now, I want to make sure you're okay. Then if you want, I can help you find out what you want next. She considered this. What if I want nothing? That's allowed too, Elias said. The concept made her chest feel tight. Time passed slowly. Elias showed her where to rest, how to use the facilities. He explained things instead of commanding them. Each explanation felt like a small crack in the wall she had built inside herself. Later, while she rested, Elias activated his communicator. He filed a preliminary report to human oversight. He described the market, the systems, the logic behind it. He hesitated before mentioning Eri, then chose his words carefully. He knew this would raise questions. When he finished, he looked toward the divider where Eri lay curled on the bed. She was asleep, her breathing shallow but steady. Elias felt something heavy settle in his mind. Responsibility, not ownership, something deeper. The next cycle, he took her to a station garden. It was a small place, artificial light shining on carefully grown plants from many worlds. Few visitors came here. Eri walked slowly, eyes wide. She reached out and touched a leaf. It moved under her fingers. It's alive, she said. Yes, Elias replied. And no one is asking it to be useful right now. She stared at the plant for a long time. They passed other beings who glanced at them with curiosity. A human walking beside a former market asset was not common. Some recognized Elias from the trade hall and whispered quietly. Eri noticed the looks and shrank inward. They're watching, she said. They can watch, Elias replied. They don't decide anything here. But they will judge you, she said, for choosing me. Elias smiled faintly. They already are, she stopped walking. Why did you choose me? He considered the question. There were many answers, but he chose the simplest. Because leaving you there felt wrong. That is not logical, she said. Humans aren't always logical, he replied. But that doesn't mean we're wrong. They sat on a bench. Eri held her hands together, thinking. I was taught that worth comes from output, she said, from measurable contribution. And what happens to those who can't contribute? Elias asked. They disappear, she said quietly. Elias looked at her. On Earth, we learn something painful. When we decide some people matter less, we all lose something. She did not fully understand, but she listened. Later that day, Elias was contacted by a station liaison. The being's tone was neutral but curious. It has come to our attention that you acquired a zero-value individual, the liaison said. This is unusual. It was legal, Elias replied. Yes, the liaison agreed, but inefficient. Elias smiled slightly. Efficiency isn't my goal. There was a pause. You are aware this choice reflects on your species. I am, Elias said. That's why I made it. The connection ended. Eri had been listening from the other side of the room. They will take me back, she said softly. No, Elias said firmly. They won't. How can you be sure? Because humans don't give up people once we've claimed responsibility for them, he said. She looked at him, searching for uncertainty. She found none. That night, Eri lay awake longer than she meant to. The station hummed around her. She replayed the day in her mind. The questions, the choices, the quiet. For the first time, her future was not a blank wall. It was an open space, and that was terrifying, but it was also hers. Somewhere deep inside, a small idea began to form. If worth was not given by others, then maybe it could be grown. She did not know how yet. But for the first time, she believed it might be possible. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. For Eri, time no longer felt like something that pressed down on her. There were no alarms telling her when to stand, when to eat, when to sleep. At first, the freedom made her uneasy. She kept waiting for rules to appear. Elias noticed this. He did not force change. He let routine form naturally. Each cycle, they ate together. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they sat in silence. Elias explained simple things about human life, about Earth, about why humans valued stories as much as numbers. Eri listened closely, storing every detail. One day, Elias placed a small data pad in front of her. "What is this?" she asked. "It's a learning device," he said. "You can use it to study anything you want." She stared at it. "Anything?" "Yes," she hesitated. "What if I choose wrong?" Elias smiled. "Then you choose again." That answer stayed with her. At first, she chose simple subjects: language refinement, basic science, station systems. She learned quickly, not because her mind had changed, but because no one was rushing her. No one was measuring her against others. Elias watched her progress quietly. He noticed patterns the market assessments had missed. Eri did not learn fast under pressure, but when allowed to explore at her own pace, she connected ideas in unexpected ways. She asked thoughtful questions. She noticed small details others ignored. One afternoon, while Elias reviewed reports, Eri stood near the window watching ships dock and depart. "They move like schools of fish," she said. Elias glanced up. "What do you mean?" "The way they adjust around each other," she explained. "Not colliding, not stopping. Just flowing." Elias leaned closer to the window. "I've never thought of it that way." She tilted her head. "Is that bad?" "No," he said. "It's interesting." The word made her pause. Interesting was not a word often used about her. As the cycles passed, word spread quietly. A human observer had taken responsibility for a zero-value being and had not returned her. Some traders laughed it off. Others grew curious. Data analysts noticed something odd. Eri's biological readings, once considered inefficient, were stabilizing. Stress markers dropped. Neural activity patterns shifted. This data reached a research guild specializing in sentient cognition. They sent a formal inquiry. Elias received the message while Eri was studying nearby. He read it twice, his expression tightening. "What is wrong?" Eri asked. "They want to observe you," Elias said carefully. "They say they're curious about why I chose you." Her shoulders stiffened. "Will they test me?" "Only if you agree," Elias said. "And if I do?" "Then they don't." She looked down. "They will say I am afraid." "Let them," Elias replied. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to know why they were wrong." Elias studied her face. He saw no fear there, only determination. "All right," he said, "but we do it on our terms." The research facility was calm and clean, much like the market, but it felt different. There were no platforms, no price panels, just rooms and equipment. The researchers were respectful, though distant. They spoke in neutral tones and asked permission before every procedure. Eri found that strange but reassuring. They ran simple tests: pattern recognition, environmental awareness, emotional response, nothing invasive. Elias stayed nearby the entire time. At first, the results seemed average, nothing that would impress galactic standards. The researchers exchanged quiet looks. Then one of them adjusted a simulation. A complex system problem appeared, one involving long-term balance rather than speed. Eri leaned forward. She studied the system without speaking. Minutes passed. The room grew still. Then she began to explain. She did not give a single solution. She described how the system would change over time, where stress would build, where failure would eventually appear. She suggested small adjustments, none dramatic but all precise. The simulation updated. The system stabilized. The researchers stared. "That approach was not in the parameters," one said. "I don't see parameters," Eri replied softly. "I see patterns." More tests followed. The same result repeated. She was not fast, she was not strong. But she saw connections others missed. By the end of the session, the researchers' curiosity had shifted into something closer to respect. When they returned to Elias' quarters, Eri sat quietly, her mind racing. They looked at me differently, she said. They saw you, Elias replied. That is dangerous, she said. Attention changes things? Yes, Elias agreed, but sometimes it changes them for the better. The next day, the inquiry became official. A council-level institution requested information. Not about Ares' value, but about Elias' decision-making process. Humans were already considered unusual. This only added to it. Elias was summoned to a hearing. Ares wanted to come. I should stay, she said at first. They may not want me there. They'll have to get used to that, Elias said. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from dozens of species. Elias stood at the center. Ares stood beside him, smaller but standing straight. You knowingly acquired a zero-value being, one council member stated. Why? Elias answered calmly. Because your system assumes worth must be proven before care is given. Humans believe care can come first. That is inefficient, another said. So was abandoning sick humans on Earth, Elias replied. We stopped doing that, murmurs spread. A third voice spoke. The individual beside you is statistically unlikely to contribute meaningfully. Ares took a breath. May I speak? She asked. The council paused. This was not expected. Proceed, a voice said. Ares' voice was quiet but steady. I was told I was worthless because I did not fit your measurements, but those measurements did not ask what I see. They did not ask how I think when I am not afraid. Silence filled the chamber. I am not exceptional, she continued. I am simply allowed to exist. Elias watched the council carefully. He saw discomfort, confusion, thought. The hearing ended without a decision. That, Elias knew, was progress. Afterward, they returned to the garden. I was scared, Ares admitted. I know, Elias said. But I spoke anyway, she said, almost surprised. You did, he agreed. She looked at the plants again, the living things that grew without needing to justify themselves. I think, she said slowly, that worth is not something you find, it is something you uncover. Elias smiled. Humans took a long time to learn that. Messages began to arrive. Some species questioned the council. Others asked to observe humans more closely. A few quietly began reevaluating their own systems. Ares continued learning. She began assisting researchers, not as a subject, but as a consultant. She worked slowly, carefully, but her insights changed models that had gone unchallenged for centuries. One evening, Elias watched her working, her focus calm and steady. They were wrong about you, he said. They were incomplete, she corrected gently. Elias laughed softly. That's very human of you, she tilted her head. Is that good or bad? Very good, he said. Ares looked out at the stars beyond the station. Once they had seemed distant and uncaring. Now they looked full of possibility. She was no longer zero. She was not a number at all. The attention did not fade, it grew. After the council hearing, messages arrived from many directions. Some were polite questions, others were formal requests. A few were warnings wrapped in careful language. Elias read them all, his expression calm but thoughtful. Ares noticed the change first. Not in Elias, but in the station. People looked at her longer now, not with dismissal but with curiosity. Some whispered, some nodded politely. A few avoided her entirely, as if unsure how to act around someone who did not fit their system. This is my fault, Ares said one evening as they sat together. If I had not spoken, Elias shook his head. This was always going to happen. You didn't cause it. You revealed it. She was quiet. Revealing things can be dangerous. Yes, Elias said. But hiding them can be worse. The next summons came from the highest level yet. A full council review. Not about Ares alone, but about human philosophy. That made many species uneasy. The council chamber was more crowded this time. Representatives leaned forward, their attention sharp. Ares stood beside Elias again, but this time she did not feel small. She felt present. A tall representative spoke first. Humans, it said, you operate on an assumption that all sentient beings possess inherent worth. Yes, Elias replied, we do. That assumption is inefficient, another voice said. It destabilizes optimized systems. Elias nodded. So did equality on Earth at first. Murmurs spread again. A third representative turned its gaze to Ares. You were deemed non-contributive. Yet you are now influencing research outcomes. Explain. Ares took a breath. She did not look at Elias this time. She looked at the council. I did not change, she said. My environment did. Silence followed. When I was assessed, she continued, I was afraid. Fear narrows thought, it slows response. Your systems measured me in fear and called it truth. Several council members shifted. When I was given safety, she said, my mind had space. I could see patterns, not faster, just clearer. A voice asked, "Are you claiming our methods are flawed?" Ari answered carefully, "I am saying they are incomplete." That word again, the council did not argue. They adjourned. Outside the chamber, the air felt lighter. Ari let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "You did well," Elias said. "I don't know if they will listen," she replied. "They already are," he said. "That's why they're uncomfortable." The change did not come as an announcement. It came as hesitation. Markets paused when zero-value beings appeared. Researchers asked new questions. Some institutions quietly delayed processing decisions, uncertain. Not everyone welcomed this. A trade consortium issued a statement warning that human influence threatened galactic stability. They argued that emotional decision-making would weaken economic efficiency. Elias read the statement aloud to Ari. "They are afraid," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "Systems don't like being questioned." Ari thought of the market platform, the quiet, the number. "I used to think fear meant I was weak," she said. "Now I see it can mean change is coming." Elias smiled. Requests came from unexpected places. Other low-ranked beings asked to meet Ari, not for rescue, for understanding. She met them in the garden. One by one they spoke. Of assessments, of rankings, of being ignored, Ari did not promise solutions, she listened. She shared her story not as a victory, but as a process. "Nothing changed all at once," she told them. "It changed because someone paused." That idea spread faster than any law. The council reconvened weeks later. This time they asked Elias to present human history. He showed them images, stories, times when humans had valued productivity over people, times when that choice had caused suffering. "We learned," Elias said, "that systems built only on output collapse when empathy is removed. Humans are still imperfect, but we no longer pretend numbers tell the whole story." A council member asked, "Are you asking us to abandon efficiency?" "No," Elias replied. "I'm asking you to redefine success." The debate lasted long cycles. Voices rose and fell. No agreement was reached, but something important happened. Emotion was introduced. A trial category, sentient protection without productivity requirement, limited, temporary. Experimental, the vote was close, it passed. Ari felt something warm spread through her chest, not relief, something stronger, recognition. Afterward, Elias and Ari returned to the quiet of their quarters. Neither spoke for a long time. "I don't belong to a category," Ari said eventually. Elias nodded. "No one really does. They may try to make me a symbol," she said. "They probably will," Elias said honestly, "but you get to decide what kind." She considered this. "Then I will be a bridge." Elias looked at her. "Between what?" "Between what they measure," she said, "and what they miss." The next cycle, Ari declined a formal title offered by the council. Instead, she requested access to education, to archives, to people. She became something new, not owned. Not ranked, not exceptional by decree, just present. Other humans arrived at the station. Observers, teachers, not to take control but to demonstrate alternatives, shared spaces, open learning, voluntary cooperation. The galaxy watched carefully. Some resisted, some adapted. Some changed quietly without announcing it. One day, Ari returned to the market hall. The platforms were still there, the panels still glowed, but something was different. One platform stood empty, its panel dark, removed from use. A trader noticed Ari and hesitated. "You were here before." "Yes," Ari said. The trader looked at the empty platform. "We no longer use that classification." Ari nodded. "That is good." As she turned to leave, she felt no anger, no triumph, only movement. That night she stood by the window again, watching ships flow like living things. "I used to think being chosen gave me worth," she said to Elias. "And now?" he asked. "Now I know worth was never waiting to be given," she replied. "It was waiting to be seen." Elias felt a quiet pride, not in himself, in humanity. The galaxy was not afraid of human weapons or technology. It was afraid of the human habit of asking one simple question. Who decided this? The changes did not arrive with celebration. There were no banners, no announcements broadcast across the stars. The galaxy did not work that way. Change came quietly, through pauses, revisions, and small choices made by individuals who had begun to question what they once accepted without thought. Ari noticed it in small things. A clerk asking a low-ranked worker how they preferred to be addressed. A trader hesitating before marking a value. A researcher requesting consent instead of assuming it. None of these acts were dramatic, but together they formed something new. Elias' assignment at Karis Gate was nearing its end. His final reports were longer than expected, not because there was more data, but because there was more uncertainty. Humans were no longer just observers. They had become a variable. Eri read some of the reports with him. "They don't know what to do with you," she said. Elias smiled. "That's usually when progress starts." Eri had changed too, though the change was not obvious from the outside. She still spoke softly, she still moved carefully, but she no longer folded herself inward. She stood as if she belonged where she was, because she did. The council's trial category became permanent sooner than expected. Other stations adopted it. Some resisted, but the system adjusted. It always did. Eri was offered many roles, advisory positions, research leadership. Symbolic representation, she declined most of them. "I don't want to stand above," she said. "I want to stand between." So she traveled. With council permission and human support, Eri moved from station to station, not as an authority but as a listener. She spoke with those still trapped by numbers, those who had learned to believe the panels more than themselves. She did not promise rescue, she asked questions. "What do you see when no one is watching? What do you think when you are not afraid?" Some did not answer. Some could not, but some did, and those answers began to change things. Elias watched from a distance. His role shifted as well. Humans were invited to contribute not as traders or soldiers, but as cultural advisors. That alone unsettled many. One council member said it openly. "You humans destabilize systems without force." Elias replied calmly, "We destabilize assumptions." That was worse. On her travels, Eri returned once more to Karis Gate. This time she walked alone. The market hall still existed, but it was smaller, fewer platforms. More discussion. The panels had changed too. Numbers were still there, but so were notes, context, uncertainty. At the far end of the hall where her platform had once stood, there was now a simple open space. No panel, no light. Eri stood there for a long time. She did not feel sadness or anger. She felt closure. A trader approached her, older than most, with careful eyes. "You were the zero-value one," it said, not unkindly. "Yes," Eri replied. "We no longer use that term," the trader said. "We found it caused errors," Eri nodded. "It did," the trader hesitated. "You did not prove your worth as many predicted." Eri met its gaze. "No, I revealed it." The trader bowed its head slightly. It was not a gesture of apology. It was acknowledgement. When Eri returned to Elias' ship, she found him packing. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "My assignment ends tomorrow." She felt a small tightening in her chest. "Where will you go?" "Back to Earth," he said. "Then wherever I'm needed." She nodded slowly. "I will stay for a while." "I figured," he said, smiling. "You have work here?" They sat together in silence, the familiar quiet that no longer felt heavy. "You changed my life," Eri said at last. Elias shook his head. "You changed it yourself. I just opened a door." She considered that. "On my world, doors are rare." "On Earth," Elias said, "we're still learning how to leave them open." The day Elias departed, the docking bay was full, not with ceremony but with presence. Representatives from several species stood nearby. Some nodded, some simply watched. Eri stood at the edge of the bay. Elias paused before boarding. "You'll be all right." "I know," she said. "That's the strange part." He smiled, then turned and walked onto the ship. As it departed, Eri felt no fear, only continuity. Years passed. The galaxy did not become kind overnight. Systems still valued efficiency. Markets still existed. Numbers were still used. But now they were questioned. Human influence spread not through conquest, but through example, through the refusal to accept that anyone could be reduced to a single measurement. Historians would later struggle to define the moment things changed. Some pointed to council votes, others to policy revisions. A few pointed to a human who paid nothing for someone deemed worthless. Eri's name appeared in archives, but not as a hero, as a reference. A case study, a reminder. She continued her work quietly, teaching, listening, building bridges. One day, a young being asked her, "How did you become important?" Eri smiled gently. "I didn't." "Then why do people listen to you?" "Because I listen first," she replied. Far away on Earth, Elias spoke to students about the galaxy. He told them about alien cultures, strange laws, and unfamiliar logic. And he told them one story more than any other, not about war, not about power, but about a girl sold for nothing. And that, he would say, is when the galaxy learned to fear humanity. Not because humans were strong, but because humans looked at a zero and said, "No, that's a person."